Well, hello everybody. Truth Seeker here, and it's been a long time since I made a video, but I thought maybe this one might be of some interest to us, especially given the particular time we're living in. This is a very unusual presidential election year, and normally I don't talk politics. I have made my business with this uh, YouTube channel to focus mostly in on the Bible students' religion, um, its impacts on people, uh, the veracity or lack of veracity of support that the Bible is real, that there's no scientific basis for it. So, talking politics is something that I don't normally do. But the other day, I saw something that I thought might be of particular interest. It actually piqued my interest quite a bit. Before this, I just want to say, that we've all been undergoing a hard time with the corona virus, the COVID-19, and it's really been a challenge for many of us. In a way, this is we haven't seen anything that's affected the nation so much since the Great Depression. I mean, families having to pull together. We, for example, we're watching our 5-year-old grandson every day because my daughter and son-in-law have to work, and he's in school and he's learning virtually, and they don't have the money to put him into a private school. So um, we have him 12 hours a day. At my age, raising another 5-year-old is not what I expected to do. But anyway, that's the way these things have gone. And this year, I've had a particularly hard time, and actually, I have to say that I'm a little bit nervous about things because since Christmas, I've been suffering from some very serious heart conditions, and I had three operations this year since between February, the middle of February, and the end of August. But it seems as if they have been able to get at the bottom of the problem. I've got some other health issues I got to work on, but mostly my weight. But uh, it seems quite promising that they may have my heart condition under control. And believe me, when you're suffering from certain types of heart conditions, you just don't have the energy to be able to do things. And it's been kind of a difficult year anyway. So I've had to prioritize. But anyway, I thought this thing might be of interest, and that's why I made it. Now, I don't have to talk about Donald Trump and the chaos that he's created in this country. There, to any critically thinking person, he's a demagogue. And, for us, ex Jehovah's Witnesses, ex Bible students, many of us, you know, were not trained from the time we were young from the time we were born to really give much consideration to politics, that it was all in God's hands, but that actually it was wrong for us to participate in politics. And so politics and getting involved in politics and taking it to heart hasn't been a part of our makeup really. And so, really, it's something relatively new for me. I voted for the first time in my life in the last election. I voted again this election. And I've followed it very closely. In particular, there's a tremendous amount of vitriol, especially on the part of Donald Trump, towards his opponents. And as the voting days shorten and the vitriol is becoming sharper and actually more irrational. I've always been particular towards science and mathematics. I think that reason is our most valuable asset as a person, especially to contribute to society in general. And science is the way to get us out of this particular crisis we're in. And to see somebody increasingly antagonistic towards science is very disturbing, very disturbing. But anyway, um, there were supposed to be 3 debates this year, and the second debate wasn't held. And the reason it wasn't held is because the president pulled back and pulled out of it, said, I want no part of a um, virtual debate. Although I work for a multinational company, billions of dollars, and we seem to do pretty well operating on a virtual basis, working with, um, seems like everything with a motor is coming out now. Um, we seem to get along quite well operating virtually uh, with these Zoom, WebEx type meetings. Have no problem at all operating a multinational, uh, multi-billion dollar corporation. I don't see why they couldn't have held a debate. Anyway, besides, that's not the point. The last debate was canceled. There were separate town halls that were held. And in the town hall that Donald Trump held, he was faced and posed the question regarding QAnon. Now, there's been a lot in the news regarding Donald Trump's lack of, um, let's say, avoidance. He tends to avoid discrediting, denouncing, disavowing uh, right wing extremists, especially these right wing hate groups, and disavowing this crazy QAnon conspiracy. And so he says that he doesn't know anything about QAnon except that they are very strong against pedophilia. So if you don't know anything about the organization, how would you know that detail? That they're very strong against pedophilia. That suggests some degree of understanding of what they do. But the problem is that he's even got that wrong. They're just making accusations and using pedophilia as basis because it's so egregious. And that's criminal in itself. That's thoughtless, and to use something so disgusting as child pornography and sexually hurting a child, that to make the allegations that the QAnon people are making regarding Democrats, politicians, and certain celebrities, including Tom Hanks, of all people. He played Mr. Rogers, for God's sakes. But making these allegations against these celebrities because they uh, tend to have more of a social uh, awareness or conscientiousness, and want to do something that benefits society, and they tend to take a little bit more of a liberal perspective politically. But regardless of that, I knew something about QAnon. I mean, I did enough reading to know what its tenets were, and pretty out there. And it doesn't really take any convincing on anybody's part for to convince me that this is a completely baseless substantisless um, theory, conspiracy theory, and it's really one of the more wild ones. But as I refreshed myself after the debate and looking up QAnon in Wikipedia, I saw something that was really quite interesting, and it touched base on what this channel has been about all along. And if I hadn't said it directly, I certainly alluded to the danger that religion poses to society in general. And there was something that caught my attention in the let's see if I get this. Okay, if you go to Wikipedia and you go into QAnon, do a search on Richard Hofstadler. Now, interestingly, I ordered this book on Saturday. Oops, there we go. Ordered this book on Saturday, and it actually came. It was delivered yesterday. I don't know. I never got anything so fast off the internet. It really surprised me because I didn't expect to get this book for quite some time. It's called The Paranoid Style in American Politics by Richard Hofstadler. Now, Richard Hofstadler, this book was written in 1964. I think it was updated in 1965. And he was one of the leading American historians. He taught at Columbia University. And he noted that there was something that was happening in American politics. Um, Actually, there's something that existed in politics in general. It wasn't just unique to the United States, but something that became increasingly prevalent within American politics since the Second World War. And in this QAnon um, uh, article in Wikipedia, talks about QAnon may be the may be understood as an example of what historian Richard Hofstadler called the paranoid style in American politics. So they're referring to this book, this essay. The title of his 1964 essay on religious millenarianism. That's what caught my eye. And the reason I did the research was because I was more interested in, like, who started this stupid QAnon thing. I knew what it was promoting, but I wanted to get a little bit more into who started this thing. Nobody knows, and but it's gotten a tremendous amount of traction, and because the president won't disavow this as being just a crazy conspiracy theory, lends credulity to the allegations that are made by this theory, and that it's growing in numbers. They don't know exactly how many people have taken this on, but it has been growing it's a very scary thing. It has been growing since March, and the Q people tend to be right wing extremists that support Trump, but they make this direct connection, the essay, and Hofstadler. Now, the very little that I've read so far, he talks about the history of paranoia, and he's talking about clinical paranoia, not that the everybody that's in these who espouses these ideas is mentally ill with paranoia, but as it's sort of a mass paranoia that becomes reflective. It builds on one another, and in sort of a cult way. And there's a certain aspect to this that is very evocative of the Miller movement, and that's what he refers to as millenarianism, which also is millennialism. Miller and Miller had a very strong effect on Protestantism in the U.S. during the 19th century, and directly had a very direct. The Adventist, Second Adventist movement had a very strong influence on Charles Taze Russell, and it also it has a style to it. Now, QAnon's vocabulary, it says here, echoes Christian tropes, the the storm, the Genesis flood narrative or Judgment Day, the Great Awakening, evoking the reputed historical religious Great Awakenings of the 18th century to the late 20th century. According to QAnon video, the battle between Trump and the Cabal is of biblical proportions, a fight for earth, of good versus evil. And some QAnon supporters say the forthcoming reckoning will be a reverse rapture. And then, things get better. I mean, the idea and the rise of the millennialism and millenarianism, using the Bible to show that there are dates in which a great reckoning is going to take place in the apocalypse. Um, Bible students called it the great time of trouble. That would end up in what they called Jacob's trouble, which was Armageddon. And once Armageddon swept through the world, unless those days be short, no flesh should be saved. So it's a final event that would lead to the extinction of humanity. That's the breadth of it. And they then God steps in, intervenes. Armageddon has successfully swept away all institutions and economic and social and religious institutions, form the basis of society, and wipe the slate clean for a new world, a theocracy in essence, for God, a 1,000-year kingdom of utopian kingdom to redeem humanity. And so there's this parallel, and this parallel has infiltrated politics, and that's what Richard Hofstadler pointed out. And he noted that there's been this rise in American politics. It it initially manifested itself on the fringe groups, McCarthyism and so on. But then, with the advent of Barry Goldwater, not too many years following McCarthy, there was this extremism that became mainstream Republican Party politics under Barry Goldwater. And since that time, this has been uh, the mainstream mode or motif or method of the Republican Party ever since its um, taking over the more centrist elements of the party, like as represented by Dwight Eisenhower, who really called the extremists, for what they were. He didn't think highly of them, the McCarthy type individuals. And it could be because Eisenhower understood the danger that existed in extreme views. I mean, he grew up a Bible student. Not many people in this country understand that Charles Taze Russell and Miller had a very strong influence on Dwight Eisenhower's youth. His mother was an avid Bible student and stayed associated with the Watchtower until her death in the 1930s. So I found some of this. I just only had a short amount of time to kind of browse through some of this, but it's interesting work. It talks about that this is certainly not unique to American politics. He points out fascism, especially Nazism in Germany, is an expression of this paranoid style uh, in which a minority takes control of the takes control of a political party and dominates a nation. It's happened and happened in very devastating way and led to horrifying consequences. And here we're facing it here in the United States now. I fear that for whoever I am, I fear that if Donald Trump wins, that we we're very much in jeopardy of losing our democracy because he has absolutely no. Um, First off, he's a liar, and how can anybody trust a liar? Why would anybody want that? Lying is not a means to an end. I mean, not when you're at that level of of influence in our country. But he goes on to show that there are examples of this religious this paranoia that had a sort of a religio political aspect to it, um, as far back in our country, as far back as the earliest days of our country. And he talks about, he goes back and gives several examples um, of the rhetoric and the type of rhetoric that was used. And there's a pattern in the rhetoric, and this pattern of rhetoric is definitely found in this QAnon conspiracy theory. And this has something to do with the Enlightenment, the 18th century Enlightenment, Voltaire, um, the Illuminati, and some of these things that came out of the rational thinking, the Jacobins, that promoted reason over blind belief and following the church, and it really threatened, caused the religious element in our country to become paranoid of these developments, and including Jeffersonian politics, Jeffersonian democracy. Jefferson wasn't a very strong, he wasn't a real advocate of religion. In fact, he created a translation of the Bible that cut out all of the miracles and had a more of an Enlightenment Bible of the sayings of Jesus, and it was quite a bit less fanciful. But he says here now. Remember, this was written in 1964, and it's perfect, absolutely nails it on the head for what's going on today. And he's talking about the reaction that that occurred back in the 18th century, 19th century, regarding some of these progressive ideas that were being promoted during the 19th century. I mean, after all, that's when socialism and rational thinking really began, in individualism. Now let us turn back 50 years to a manifesto signed in 1895 by a number of leaders of a populist party. As early as 1865-66, a conspiracy was entered in between the gold gamblers of Europe and America. For nearly 30 years, these conspirators have kept people quarreling over less important matters, while they have pursued with unrelenting zeal their one central purpose. Every device of treachery, every resource of statecraft, and every artifice known to the secret cabals of the international gold ring are being made use of to deal a blow to the prosperity of the people and the financial and commercial independence of our country. And so they're here referring to some kind of a conspiracy that's taking place to keep Americans and our independence, to steal it away, to control it, and every device of treachery. And notice that there's always rhetoric. Demagogues always use rhetoric like this. I mean, look at what Donald Trump just said the other day, when a very real conspiracy was being planned to take the life of the governor of Michigan. I mean, this is an unprecedented situation, and the FBI arrested some 13 individuals and charged them with the intent to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan. Now, that's not who we are. I mean, that's not the America I grew up under. I mean, this is appalling stuff. And Donald Trump went to Michigan, and he's saying, lock her up. And he started a chant that got the crowd in a fervor to lock her up. Lock her up for what? This is scary stuff. People get this crowd mentality, and they lose all sense of reality. They lose all sense of being reasonable and rational. Here's another instance, another 50 years. Now, he wants to point out that these were separated. These examples were separated by 50 years. Uh, Next, a Texas paper article of 1855. It is a notorious fact that the monarchs of Europe and the Pope of Rome are at this very moment plotting our destruction and threatening the extinction of our political, civil, and religious institutions. We have the best reasons for believing that corruption has found its way into our executive chamber, and that our executive head is tainted with the infectious venom of Catholicism. Back then, Catholicism was considered very dangerous to Protestantism. In fact, even my grandfather, who grew up in the around the turn of the century, that this animosity between the two still existed. Um, he really had a disdain for Catholics, and that lasted his entire life. We have the best reason for believing the corruption has found its way into the executive chamber. The Pope has recently sent his ambassador to the state of this country on a secret commission. No evidence, just this flippant allegation that they're planning and threatening our extinction. You see, the rhetoric, the extremism, the baseless extremism, of which is an extraordinary boldness of the Catholic Church throughout the United States. The minions of the Pope are boldly insulting our senators, reprimanding our statesmen, and propagating the adulterous union of church and state, abusing the foul calumny of all governments but Catholic, and spewing out the bitterest execrations on all Protestantism. The Catholics in the United States receive more than $200,000 annually for their creed. At the time, that was a lot of money. Finally, this last example he gives was a sermon in 1798 that is, again, talking about Europe and the Enlightenment and its influences on our country. Secret and systematic means have been adopted and pursued with zeal and activity by wicked and artful men in foreign countries to undermine the foundations of this religion, Christianity, and to overthrow its altars. You see, they're to overthrow. That's what the Democrats are to destroy this nation. That's their intent. You see, and thus to deprive the world of its benign influence on society. These impious conspirators and philosophers have completely effected their purposes in large portion of Europe and boast of their means of accomplishing their plans in all parts of Christendom, glory in the certainty of their success, and set opposition at defiance. Now, these quotations were taken from intervals of a half century. Given the keynote style of thought in the history of the United States, one finds it, for example, in the anti-Masonic movement, the Masons, and the nativist anti-Catholic movement, in certain spokesmen for abolitionism who regarded the United States as being in the grip of a slaveholders conspiracy, in many writers alarmed by Mormonism, and in the greenback and populist writers who constructed a great conspiracy of international bankers in the exposure of munition makers conspiracy of the First World War. So this is something that has repeated itself in American politics over and over and over again. Now, interestingly, there is there was some footnote here that talks about its connection to millenarianism and actually its influence on this paranoia style. The paranoid spokesman sees the fate of this conspiracy in apocalyptic terms. He traffics in the birth and death of the whole world. See, everything is all or nothing. Everything is going to be destroyed or nothing. Whole political orders, whole systems of human values. He is always manning the barricades of civilization. He constantly lives at a turning point. It is either now or never in organizing resistance to conspiracy. Time is forever just running out, just around the corner. That's what the Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses have been saying about the end of the world for 140 years. Like religious millenarians, he expresses the anxiety of those who are living through the last days, and he is sometimes disposed to get to set a date for the apocalypse. Time is running out, said Welsh in 1951. Evidence is Welsh was one of these conspiratists. The problem is that this has found its way into mainstream politics, and in particular, he notes, and this is back in the 1960s, into right-wing politics, the Republican Party in particular, and the turning point was with Goldwater. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember the Lyndon Johnson Goldwater debates, but he brings out millenarianism. And he makes a footnote here. This is so interesting. I'll just read a little more. Evidence is piling up on many sides and from many sources that 1952 is the fatal month when Stalin will attack, and the apocalypticism of the paranoid style runs dangerously near to hopeless pessimism, but usually stops just short of it. Apocalyptic warnings arouse passion and militancy and strike at susceptibility to similar themes in Christianity. Properly expressed, such warnings serve somewhat the same function as a description of the horrible consequences of sin in a revivalist sermon. They portray that which impends, but which may still be avoided. And down here he writes, probably the most spectacular American instance of such Adventism is in the case of William Miller. William Miller, who had a direct influence on Charles Taze Russell, who flourished in New York in the 1830s. The offspring line of Baptist preachers, Miller became preoccupied with millenarian prophecies and made calculations which indicated that Christ would come at first in 1843 and then on October 1844. When 1843 didn't work out, he had to add another year. Oh, there is no year zero, and became the leader of an Adventist sect with a considerable following on the appointed day. And when you consider at the time, there was probably only about, I don't know, I think, let's see, the Civil War, there were 30 million Americans during the Civil War. And probably 20 years before that, maybe there were 15, 20 million Americans in the United States. Um, so he was actually quite prominent a figure when you think about it in relative proportion. And let's see, and became a leader of the Adventist sect with a considerable following. Uh, on the appointed day, Millerites gathered to pray. We all know this story as Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses know that. But this is our history. This is our background. On the appointed day, Millerites gathered to pray. Many abandoned their worldly occupations, and some disposed of their property. The Miller movement waned after the fatal day, but other Adventists, more cautious about their use of dates, carried on. And most notably, there was Nelson Barber and Charles Russell and their association and their date, 1873, which is only 40 years after um, Miller, and 30 years, I'm sorry. A notable quality in Miller's work was the rigorously logical and systematic character of his demonstrations, as was his militant opposition to Masonry, Catholicism, and other seductions. His lieutenants and followers, you see, we think of him as sort of a chronology whack, but he also spoke out militantly in opposition to Masonry, Catholicism, and other seductions. His lieutenants and followers, A. Whitney Cross has remarked, found the world beyond rescue, legislatures corrupt, and infidelity, idolatry, Romanism, sectarianism, seduction, fraud, murder, and duels all waxing stronger. Cross argues that the Millerite movement was not so far from the mainstream of American Protestantism as some might think. The Millerites cannot be dismissed as ignorant farmers, libertarian frontiersmen, impoverished victims of economic change, or hypnotized followers of a maniac thrown into prominence by frequent coincidences. When the whole of American Protestantism came so very close to the same beliefs. Their doctrine was the logical absolute of fundamentalist orthodoxy, as perfectionism was to the extreme of revivalism. All Protestants expected some grand event about 1843, and no critic from the Orthodox side took any serious issue on basic principles with Miller's calculations. In other words, he had the if he didn't have strong support, he didn't have much in the way of opposition either from uh, the the vast or overriding body of Protestants, because they were all pretty much in the same boat at the same time. They were all expecting something in 1843. Let's see, took all Protestants expected some grand event around 1843, and no critic from the Orthodox side took serious issue on the basic principles of Miller's calculations. The burned over district, Ithaca, New York, 1950, pages. He's citing that for a good account of the Millerite movement. All right, so he's he's referring to a good reference to that describes the Miller movement. For the story of an interesting contemporary prophetic cult and some sober reflections on the powerful resistance of true believers to overwhelming disconfirmation. And so he's making some references there to the reaction to Miller's movement. But anyway, it just caught me and caught my attention of how this paranoid style of politics really derived from religion, and in particular millenarianism. And millenarianism is very closely connected to millennialism too. They're all very similar. They're all born of the same at this pretty much around the same time, and a promoting pretty much the same sort of thing. Devastating, apocalyptic end of society. And that's what this QAnon is all about. They have the same rhetoric, they have the same catastrophic implications if this isn't addressed. and Trump is the savior of the world, and that he's going to arrest all of these baby killing, baby blood drinking Democrats and Hollywood celebrities. So it's terrible, and that he's going to affect a great storm that of that's going to render a reckoning against these people and the sins that they committed. And so there's this same mentality, the same mindset as religious fanaticism that exists within uh, the politics that we're seeing now, and the vitriol is getting worse and worse, and what we see is extraordinarily dangerous to our way of life, because these individuals are highly motivated, highly motivated. These are people like the Millerites who are willing to sell their lands and give up what they have to take action. And it's like what happened in Germany during the 1920s politically, when this fringe movement became mainstream and took over the world, and their paranoid philosophies ended up in atrocities that we think of as unthinkable. Um, 2/3 of the entire Jewish population of Europe were wiped out in death camps, and the awful fear that they instilled, the hate that existed, and we developed we called the United Nations to so that something like this could never happen again. But it's happening now. At first we kind of dismissed it. McCarthyism was a fringe thing, although it got too much traction. The paranoia that our society was going to be swept away by communists infiltrating our government. But it didn't take long for people to realize that he was a crank, and and but it wasn't very long before that kind of a paranoid uh, way of political, uh, let's say, political style, made its way into mainstream uh, right wing politics in the Republican Party. And that's what he's saying here. Now, this guy, he died in 1970, but he couldn't see that what we're going through is exactly what he was talking about and predicted would happen in the 1960s. And and apparently, a lot of what he had said here is prophetic of what we're actually undergoing right at this moment in this year's election. So, when you think that the Bible students are benign. Uh, no, religion and that kind of thinking is not benign, and it doesn't take long. It doesn't take much. It takes a charismatic leader and circumstances, and you've made it malignant. It becomes a malignant thing, and it sweeps over the the minority ends up bullying its way over the majority, and most people don't think that anything that outlandish will really have its impact until it's too late. So we need to act now, And in this particular election, those that don't support what's going on in the presidency right now, uh, it's imperative that we act, that we learn from history. That's what history is about: learning the mistakes that we've made, and doing something about it. And that's I think that's important. Um, I mean, even today now, the latest, when you don't think you can be shocked any further, there was a direct attack by President Trump on science. Period. I mean, for the first time ever in its 175-year history, Scientific American, the reputed journal um, to convey scientific advancement that has always been a hallmark of our country, uh, to the public, um, uh, has made an endorsement, and it's endorsed Joe Biden because of Trump's anti-scientific stance. And the same with Nature. The magazine Nature has an article that was published that talked about the extreme damage that Trump has done to the credibility of science, and it may take decades to repair. It's very concerning, very concerning. And so today, Donald Trump called Dr. Fauci an idiot. Now that is that is the kind of despot that we have running this country. Here's he knows nothing at all about medicine, about that aspect of science. I doubt he knows anything about science. Period. What makes an airplane fly? What makes a boat float? What momentum is? Nothing. I doubt he understands any science whatsoever, and he derides the CDC's expert on infectious disease and public health as an idiot. We can't take this anymore. We just can't. We just can't accept that any longer. And this is the danger that we face by letting religion and religious influences and religious thought and the things that come out of it are not safe. They're not safe. They're parasitic to our existence. So anyway, enough with that. I've spoken my piece. I 2 weeks will know what's going to happen. But I hope you make the right choice, and I think the right choice in this case is to take a man who knows not what he's doing and remove him from office, because he's damaging our country beyond repair. I think 4 more years and we'll become an autocracy. We won't we won't have we won't have a constitutionally based government. So vote. I think everybody needs to vote, and make a point. Make a point of it. Again, I don't usually get into politics. I don't think I've ever talked about politics, but having seen that connection, I just found it uncanny, and how it has its background in, of all things, the thing that caused the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society to come into. No wonder the Watchtower basically an autocracy. I mean, they actually they don't hide it. They call themselves God's theocracy, and they expect that they're going to be the God's government on earth, and God is the ultimate dictator, and they will be ruling the earth. So, anyway, uh, I hope to be making more videos. It all depends on time, but I've had good followers, and I wish you all the best. Stay safe, wear a mask, social distance. Those are simple, scientifically proven things to keep you safe. And I wish you well until next time. And I wish you all the best.